It's that weird kind of in between. And so that idea of freedom, and as we know, is poverty freedom, is not understanding where your food and if your food is going to be there as prices rise, is that freedom? But beyond that, the idea of protection is laughable to me, because I think that in this country, and I'm saying this as a public educator, in this country, we have talked about since 1954, separate but equal being something that we don't agree with.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this installment of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. I'm your host, Nick Comstock. You guys, we have an awesome guest today, and I can't wait to get to him. But before all that, I want to take just a couple minutes to do a couple show notes. As you guys know, I had a book come out on April 30th called Trailblazing and Transforming Entrepreneurial Stories of People with Disabilities. It will be in the show notes. I'm chapter 5. I work with 11 amazing other authors to tell our stories about how we've had to go and basically pull ourselves up by our bootstraps because the agency that the government pays for thinks we basically have no value as people with disabilities in the workforce. So we're left to carve our own path. And I tell my story, as well as there's 11 other great stories in there. So please go on Amazon and get it. You can get it through Kindle, or you can get it in paperback. And we are working on the audio version. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be great. The other thing that I want to mention to you guys is that, I bring great content, I think, to you guys every week, and I want to make sure that I'm able to do that. So if you're able to donate anything, $5, $10, $20, I have a GoFundMe in my link tree right now that you're able to donate to. Right now it says van fundraiser. I've been trying to raise money for a handicap accessible van for over a year, and we're going to expand that to my podcasting and public speaking career. So you'll see a change in that. But for right now, it says van fundraiser. If you could just donate $5 or $10 to that, I would greatly appreciate it, and it would be such a help. So now that we've taken care of all that business, you guys, we have an incredible guest today from Michigan. Don't judge me, Ohio people, but I interview guests from everywhere. And we have another doctor in the house. This is the second doctor we've had on the program. He's a doctor in humanities, basically telling us why we're all here, I think. So his name is Dr. Adam Hazlett, and I am so happy to have him. Dr. Adam, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you, Nick. I'm doing well. It's Friday, and I'm feeling good.
Yeah, we all feel good on Friday. They all don't feel so good on Monday or Tuesday, which is why I try to bring a podcast on Tuesday to make everybody feel good. But yeah, it's Friday here. I just took a hot shower before coming on the air, so I feel pretty good too.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, Dr. Adam, why don't you tell everybody what your doctorate is in and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the program. Well, we'll be into the program, but we'll get into stuff deeper and have a little fun.
Thanks. I'm a doctor of humanities. That's kind of basically all of those subjects that everyone has to take while they're getting other degrees. Philosophies, literature, religious studies. And so I teach full time. I've been doing so for over 20 years at the collegiate level. Love my job, but I also do outreach work with the state of Michigan, with the Self Advocates of Michigan, and through my nonprofit. And again, I'm in Michigan now, but I'm an Ohio boy. I grew up in the Hocking Hills region, down in the hollers and in the sticks. Yeah, and then moved up here for graduate school. everyone always asked me why didn't you come back home after and it was higher education. I was in the industry and the industry was here. And so, yeah, you go where the work is, just like a whole bunch of other people. So
Just like a whole bunch
yeah.
of other people moved from West Virginia to come up here to the steel mill. My grandfather was
Yeah. Yeah,
there.
yeah, the steel mills. They always talked about it in Eastern Kentucky. One of the old timers I knew said that they'd always taught reading, writing, and Route 23, the 3 R's, because Route 23 ended in Detroit and in Flint. But on the way, if you got stopped off in Toledo or wherever, Finley building tanks, it's good. Make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. So how we're gonna get into your disability now and what it is, and because a lot of people don't know what neurodivergent is, and you're my second guest that I've had that has well, the last guest I had has somebody in their family. Her brother is neurodivergent, and she kind of explained that a little bit. And so, how does your disability affect what you do today in your work? And kind of explain what that is and all that.
Okay. Well, yeah, and neurodivergence can cover a lot, but I am autistic and ADHD, so they refer to that as ADHD. And the autism part is what everyone focuses on and qualifies, right? Because that's you and I have had discussions in other times, and what qualifies someone. So I'm autistic, openly and proudly, and it's one of those disabilities that like even some of the physical disabilities can come and go, right, depending on inflammation, depending on and so it is one of those things that, for lack of a better word, sometimes can be hidden, right? And then other times absolutely cannot be. And so how it has affected me and how it kind of has worked is and I utilize the Incredible Hulk, kind of imagery, because it really is, or even the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the idea of, that those two brains kind of competing, and the body not being able to communicate with itself, me not being able to communicate with the outside world, and just a trapped in both inside and outside, right? And so I always say that autism is not, because people always conflate autism with IQ. They conflate it with some kind of brilliance, right? So it's either the spectrum is either on the very bottom end or the very top end. There's never a middle, right? There's either, severely autistic, or there is Sheldon Cooper. But autism, I always explain it's about communicating. My brain sometimes can't communicate with myself, and I don't know what I'm feeling. And it also has a hard time communicating with the world. It's taking in so much information all the time. And if you think about trying to listen to 50 radios at once and pick out the lyrics of one song, and then do that every day for 20 years, for 30 years, eventually you'll space madness, right? Like Ren and Stimpy, you're going to go space mad. And so autism, not communicating with myself, not communicating with the world, led to raised cortisol levels. It led to, I am half the man, literally half the man I was even 5 years ago. I was pushing 500 pounds because my body was screaming. I was seeking sensory input through food. I was seeking, I couldn't figure out, because as we know now, my brain was pumping cortisol through my system. I was constantly in a stressed state. I was, plaque was building up in my arteries. My digestive system wasn't, there are all of these physical things that our brains and our nervous systems can do, obviously, to our bodies, that people outside the disability community don't understand. They see themselves as masters of their own fate. They see themselves as captains of their bodies, captains of their brains, captains of their souls, but we're not. And so giving up that control is one of those things that my disability requires. And I think a lot of disabilities, right, require us, and I know you and I have talked about it, to give up modesty, humility, control, like all of these things, right? Here I am with multiple college degrees in humans, an expert in how humans work. And there are times that I have to turn to my partner and say, why was that funny? Can you explain to me, were they being sarcastic? Can you, again, Nick, I hate to say it, my disability has affected me in as much as I have a doctoral degree in religious theory and didn't understand the chicken crossing the road joke. I got that last year when they were talking about the autism test. If you can tell you're autistic, if you don't understand that the other side is talking about heaven. And I went, wait, the chicken crossed the road to get to I just thought that was a dumb joke. My gosh, I'm a 46-year-old PhD and I don't know this. Yes.
I just thought it meant to get to the other side of the road.
Me too.
The first time you're telling me it meant to get to the other side of heaven.
This is that literal thinking, right? The way our brains engage the information.
Yeah, sure. I know several different autistic people, and one of them has told me on a constant basis that she feels that autism is like a superpower. Do you feel that way?
I don't like this superpower terminology. I don't like the differently abled stuff because we live in a world. I mean, again, as an autistic person, my brain is very literal. And my brain looks at the world and looks at the patterns and says, oh, this is how it goes. This is the way in which things work. And sometimes it freaks me out. And sometimes it causes me to flee the situation and things like that. But at other times, it makes me realize that if I start utilizing other terms and I start utilizing other words, all I do is myself a disservice. Because in this world, in the United States anyway, we are legally two things. We're disabled or we're handicapped.
Yep.
And depending on our disability and or our handicap, we may have to accept other terms within that we don't personally believe, right? I mean, like I work under an ARC, and that R doesn't stand for a word that I, identify under. There was a discussion yesterday amongst some of my friends who identify as little people who were saying, look, the medical condition is dwarfism. I am not a dwarf. I am a little person, but medically, when my paperwork is handed out, that ism is on my paperwork. And if I don't claim that, what happens when I go to the insurance company? What happens when I go to the doctor? What happens when I go to a court of law and say, I need protection as a disabled person? And they say, well, you've never claimed to be disabled. You said you were differently able. You've always claimed. You know what I'm saying? They'll use, I know how the power of language. And I know that in our world, because this is why I studied all the things I studied. I didn't understand as an autistic person why some people spoke things into existence and other people didn't. Some people had the power to create words. And if other people said supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, people go, that's gibberish. Stop your nonsense. But if you're Walt Disney, you can do that. If you've got power, if you've got a PhD after your name, if you've got, there were all of these little wizard hats in the world. And I was like, how does that work? And so I think that we will inadvertently play into those games of language because language is important. I mean, this is why banks never called Bitcoin currency. So that if it ever goes up and down, they go, not us, right? Not us. And if we disassociate ourselves from disability or even the handicapped word, I just think ultimately it'll serve for our own demise in that instance. That's how we have those protections, little protections we have.
I'm going to get into that in just a minute. It's a good segue. That's why I hate the words, and I literally do. I despise them. I hate the word differently abled. I hate the word I have different abilities. I don't have disabilities. It's just done so much damage to our culture because it took me so long to accept that I have a disability. This is my lot in life. And then I finally get to a point where I accept it. And then you have buffoons in the world saying, no, you're not disabled. You're differently abled. What?
Yes. And I mean, it is. And this is where, in my community, the difference between neurodivergent and the idea of neurodiversity. Because like you and I have said, everyone is differently abled, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that everyone is disabled. And all of our brains are neurodiverse. That doesn't mean that they're neurodivergent, right? And so it's very much the same thing. And those words mean something. And they do, because that's where, when the rubber meets the road and they go in, they say, well, what's the contract say? What does the word say? They're gonna drill down to the and the or, and we know that if you put in, at least us old folks know that if you put in a search term and rather than or, you're gonna get a completely different set of results. If you put a but in or rather than a yet with Boolean searches, you're gonna get a completely different result. So the brain does the same thing. Human communication, we do the same thing. It becomes a binary.
Yeah, it drives me nuts, Dr. Adam, because, we're in a culture where it says, be who you are, stand in your truth. And the disabled community doesn't want to do that because they want to deny, because we've been treated so bad because of our disability, they want to deny the fact that they are disabled, and they want to fit in so bad. You know what? I used to be so interested in fitting in, but now it's like, who cares?
Yeah. Well, and it's internalized ableism. It's what we are taught by society. Unless we're told otherwise, unless we have people around us that say that's not the way that it always has to be. And I know this because I grew up in a small Appalachian town with parents who grew up in a small town, but they told me you can live in this small town for the rest of your life as long as you leave it for at least a week. Like when you're an adult, get out there and see that there's something else. You can choose to come back to this, right? Yeah. But I don't want you, they didn't want us being there and not knowing that there was another world, like being born in a basement and never seeing the ground floor, and always believing that there's no sun.
How did your parents handle you with your disability? Were they like, you can do whatever you want? Did they try to hold you back from anything?
I always jokingly say that, especially in Appalachia, you can be weird, and autism causes, allows people to be weird or makes us be weird, one of the two. But as long as you are weird, Appalachia, you're okay. But my parents were, they were not locals who were born and raised there. So they were already outsiders, right? They were a little bit different than, my dad was, we had encyclopedias, he cooked meals and stuff. And this was back in the 80s, and this was in Appalachia and stuff. And he taught me how to sew a needle, use a needle and thread and things like this. But they never stopped. And I think that was probably the best thing. They never stopped me from being interested in things. And that's why I think my special interests, because, we get or in the autism world, we get these kind of hyper focuses and these special interests. And mine has always been learning things and understanding people, accents and costumes and history and culture and all of this stuff. But they always kind of leaned into it. Like when I would use up all of Dad's electrical tape, making pirate swords out of hog sticks that I'd gotten at the fair, using all of his grindstones on his fancy, mill to just grind down wood. Like I was just ruining things left and right just for the, cutting out pages from books to make stuff. They would encourage it. And they would, when I got into X, Y, and Z, they would take me to North Carolina and we would go to, the reservation and we would read, they'd get me books. Even the days before Amazon, they would drive me into the county library and they would let me check out all of the old monster movies, from the library and do all those hyper kind of focus things. And even when it got, and I think about this often, Nick, even when my study of kind of indigenous rights and American history got to a point where in 1993, the small rural Appalachian high school that I was in, or the school that I was in middle school at the time, I announced to my parents, I said, based on the treatment of indigenous people in the United States, I will no longer stand for the Star Spangled Banner. And they said, what? And I said, based on my reading of history and what happened at Wounded Knee, I do not feel comfortable standing right now. And they said, we will stand. We will defend your right to do that, to sit. but you got to realize you're going to get pushback. We will defend your right to do it, and we will support your right to do it. But, and I remember them basically saying, in that moment of them saying, we don't agree with what you're doing, but we support it if you have a reason and if you have conviction. And that moment to me sums up why I wasn't worse off than I was, because, I talked about cortisol, but when you talk about suicide rates in the autistic community, when you talk about, a lot of those things, it gets ugly. It gets ugly. And I think I might be a lot worse off had I not had that weird, or that supportive weird.
Yeah. So how do you feel now? Do you stand for the national anthem?
I mean, now well, yeah, because that's the funny thing, Nick, the binary dichotomous autistic mind. That was what, 8th grade. And 2 years later, based on a project that I was doing for a marketing class in 10th grade, I went in and again, I was fascinated with the idea. We had to research sales and why would somebody buy a product, right? And it was 10th grade marketing for DECA and stuff. And I said, well, what product does somebody sell that is like the craziest product, right? And I was like, holy crap, military recruiters literally sell the idea of giving your life away and then they like kids said, how does that work? So I went in and like started hanging out as a 10th grader in the military recruiting office. And by, 11th, 12th grade, yeah, I was applying to the military academies. I was high and tight. I mean, you better stand for the damn anthem. And so how times change. And even then, and this is very important, because my parents did not support so much me not standing for the anthem, but I know my father was not supportive at all of me saying, yes, I want to go to the military academy. Yes, I want to go and do, because I didn't want to just go and serve. I wanted to like he sat me down and said, let's watch, kind of we watched Apocalypse Now or a movie like that. And he said, doesn't this make you take pause? And I said, no, I want that. And he was like, whoa, like there was a point where had I been 10 years later, he might've like called up and there might've been a red flag, right? There might've been a call to the school counselor, but he didn't push back against that. He didn't say over my dead body, right? Which would have, in my mind, when you trigger that amygdala, would have been like, oh, hell yes, I will. And I dig in my toes, I dig in my heels, and I start digging trenches. And I really do think about those binaries, right? Because here I am protesting, here I am, on the other side of that within, a half a decade. And both times, my support system said, okay, if that's what you want to do and you have a reason to do it, we will support you. Which I know is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to go back to something you said about because we're so free and protected. And you said it sarcastically, which I love, because last week in my comments on one of my shorts, I had somebody ask me, or they were basically going off on me in my comments and saying, because I was explaining to them that nobody wants people with disabilities in their employment. And I feel like, I just went on about something. And he said, what do you want? You're in America. You're free and protected. Go to another country. Ridiculous. And I replied to him and I said, I don't feel free and protected when I'm forced to be in poverty because of my disability. And then when I try to get out of that on my own, I risk losing services that I desperately need for my everyday life, because I make the decision and I say, I refuse to be in poverty anymore just because of my disability. What do you have to say about people who say you're free and protected, you get help from the government because you're disabled?
Well, yeah, I mean, help. And the idea of free and protected is, to me, kind of laughable in a country, even in the best of places, where transportation is not accessible, where, like you've even said, you gotta get the van, but you got to be able to do so within the confines of what you can save. I know someone who has a van but can't save the money to get the training that she would need to drive the van, because when she saves enough money to pay the trainer, she's going to have, she's going to hit that threshold, right? And it's that weird kind of in between. And so that idea of freedom, and as we know, is poverty freedom is not understanding where your food, and if your food is going to be there as prices rise, is that freedom. But beyond that, the idea of protection is laughable to me, because I think that in this country, and I'm saying this as a public educator, in this country, we have talked about since 1954, separate but equal being something that we don't agree with, right? But separate but equal was codified in 1990 when the ADA was signed. It was codified for the disabled community. We may not believe in separate but equal for other things, but by God, we will have you go through a separate entrance. We will have you go through a separate process. We will have you have to prove that you've been discriminated against 3 times before you can get any kind of justice.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what is laughable when someone says free and protected, because it screams to me of like a Dickens novel, of like, a young kind of, I see no fingers on the gloves, and I see a young boy with a bowl of gruel asking for some more and saying, "Thank you, sir. Will you hit me twice as I walk away?" And that's why, going back to even something we said earlier, that's why a lot of people in our community are like, I don't want to be there. I don't want you to think I'm one of them, because then, you know what I'm saying? Like there is, as we know, there are these separate Americas, and the disabled America is not, unless you're really, really rich, not a happy place.
No, it's not.
Because you're paying more for everything. You're paying taxes on things that other people don't even think about. Other people evacuate their bowels and don't think that it costs them money other than toilet paper, or they go out, well, I'm going to walk down to the store to get groceries. Well, some of us can't do either of those things, go to that place or walk to that place. And so I think there's so much that we don't know because we don't know. And there's so much that we don't want to know, because if we did, then we would.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to continue on the protection aspect, because to the person in my comments who said I was free and protected, I want to tell you just one of many stories that I have where I wasn't protected. So back in 2018, I had moved out on my own. It was the first time of me being on my own, and I was with roommates. And so we had double staffing in our house. And we had this caregiver who, for purposes of the story, just to identify, I'll call her Jean. And she started out really, really good. All my roommates liked her. She was cooking. For those of you who don't know, it's hard to come by a caregiver who can actually cook. And she was cooking. She was really good. Once she got in there, she just became really, really controlling. And one day I was eating chicken with my fingers. Chicken to me has always been a finger food. And she looked at me, and she had been verbally abusive in the past, and I had just been dealing with it. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh my God, Nick, did your parents teach you anything? You're such a slob, this, that." And so I reported that to my case manager at the time. Well, one of the other staff, because I have to dictate everything, so it's done by voice, one of the other staff overheard me sending that email. So the other staff decides to tell Jean, "Hey, Nick's reporting you to his case manager." So this staff member decided not to feed me for an entire day, not to talk to me for an entire day, and do the bare minimum of her job. And she didn't feed. She prepared food for she prepared food for both my roommates, not for me. She never came to my room and said, "Hey, food's ready. What do you want?" She took my roommates out and left me, which was fine. I had alone time, what they call here in the state of Ohio. So it was fine that she had left me, but she didn't prepare me food. So finally, at 4 o'clock that day, I had to spend money out of my own pocket to get food. And I took this situation all the way to the state, all the way to the top of that I could. And do you know what they said to me? They said, because you could buy your own food, we can't process it as neglect. So please tell me, how is that me being number one, free, number two, protected? Please tell me that.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. And that's exactly, I think, people like the commenter in your chat, and people like Gene and others rely on. They rely on the fact that there is this world that exists kind of at the half level. I think of, like, being John Malkovich, that floor in the movie where it's kind of a half floor. They have literally created this world kind of underneath, where they have sub-minimum wage labor, where they have, all of these things that they have created within this realm of the disabled community. And just as, Gene proved, well, I'll take away your basic human rights. And I will show you the power. I mean, almost in a Game of Thrones type way. I will show you the power that one human can have over another. I will show you that my heel, your face, my boot, your face kind of thing. And for no other reason, right, than a perception of equality, a perception of similarity, a perception of belonging in the same community. Because we don't belong in the same community, because we've created these different. And so shockingly, the people that come and serve and work for and with us don't really work for us, because it's almost like, the city worker who doesn't live in that city, right? If I don't care if the garbage gets picked up, because I don't live in the city of Wicket. So if I move off, go back to my suburban home or wherever, I don't care. Right. If I don't, I don't have students in the school district, and I'm the teacher that's, kind of messing everything up, I don't care. If I'm the baker that's not eating the food that I'm preparing, I don't care. So there's a lot of that. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of that. It's not me. And the problem with disability, and this is the problem that I say all the time, is that there's only one way that you're not getting out of this world being disabled. And that's catastrophic death. That is instant that is like Final Destination, back of a truck kind of thing. Like, that's shadows on a wall kind of, right? Atomic.
Killed instantly.
It has to be instant, because if you continue to live in this life, even if it's for a day, you're going to be part of this community. It's just whether you accept it or not.
Yeah. And it only takes a matter of seconds, people. Matter of seconds. And it just boggles my mind. And people ask me all the time in my TikToks, why can't you get off your ass and get a job? Well, first of all, getting off my ass is a little hard to do. I'm in a wheelchair. I know you can immediately see that. But as far as getting a job, I've been told I'm unemployable and I have, quote, nothing to offer an employer. That was told to me by someone in the state of Ohio who is paid to people find jobs. And that's why when Ohio says we're an equal opportunity employer, I laugh, because I've been through at least this system twice. I was told in the state of Indiana that there was nothing they could do for me because of my disabilities. So then when I tried to go through a work at home opportunity from my brother, because they told me there was nothing they could do, I was told, you lied to us at Voc Rehab. Well, I didn't lie to you. You told me there was nothing that I could do. So what do you expect me to do? I told you, I came to you with a job opportunity. You bought me the equipment. And now you tell me because I say it didn't work out with my brother that I lied? Like, how insane is that?
Well, I mean, It makes little sense to me. It baffles me, Nick. It really does.
Yeah. And why is it that the first round of employment that we're offered, which, hello, come to the 21st century, Voc Rehab, there's no greeters in stores anymore. Why?
Yeah.
Why is it the first thing that we're all, oh, you could be a greeter at Kroger. You could be a greeter at Walmart. You know what those people do now? They stand on their phone and they look
Yeah.
for.
Well, and I mean, in the work that can be done, we know that, there's a big push for, getting rid of remote work and da 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 da. So the work that can be done, it's even to the point where I was just reading an article this morning. It was on LinkedIn, a woman who I believe she lost all four limbs, and she had a big internship. And they basically said, well, you gotta come to Virginia. And she said, it's a remote internship. And they said, yeah, but we want you physically in this state. And she's like, but I never have to go to the headquarters. And they're like, yeah, we know, but you have to physically be in this state. And she's like, I can't do that. I don't know if you know about, and you and I've talked about this, you can't, freedom of movement is another freedom that the disabled don't have, because services and caseworkers and this and this and this and this, and heck, some of us, and especially in the neurodivergent community, if I move doctors, I don't get my medicine for 90 days. And if I don't get my medicine for 90 days, some of us can end up in the hospital or in jail or worse, because executive function and all of these things. And when you we're going to take all of that brain functioning and we're going to make it go cold turkey. What does the brain do when it goes cold turkey on stuff? It goes haywire. Like, there's all of these things that come with simple things that the non-disabled community don't think about. They don't think about, they say, oh, well, can't you just move? If you have a problem with the first floor apartment, just move to a second floor apartment. Okay, easy enough for you, right? Because
that's just real simple.
But even, I think about that because I see people all the time. They'll be like, well, yeah, this venue's accessible. And I walk in and my toe hits a 4-inch curb. And I'm like, no, it's not. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, it's not. And they're like, well, that's just a little bump. No, it's not. I want you to drag, and I show, when I go around to places and I have them, I literally, I say, no, I want you to pull your feet. If you pick your foot up this much, you're doing it wrong. If you're checking for accessibility, I want you to, just imagine going around and because again, we don't know what we don't know. And I've never thought about the uneven sidewalk. I've never thought about the 4-inch curb. I've never thought about the fact that my doorway maybe is a little too narrow, or my aisles in my store, maybe you can't turn around in. And then when you get to the end of that aisle, you can't turn right. You're stuck in the back of the convenience store.
Yeah, absolutely. People champion the ADA. Hey, we have the ADA. Do you guys know the ADA is as old as I am? I'm 35 years old. So is the ADA. Do you know that it hasn't been updated in 35 years? Since its inception, it hasn't been updated. So
I was in 6th grade.
Yeah, just because we can get into a building does not mean that it's accessible. I know that's what everybody has trained you to believe, those who are able-bodied. And another thing, everybody who chime in anytime you want, Adam. I'm just on tangent. Anybody who thinks that, oh, well, my tax dollars pay for food stamps, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'm going to say allegedly on this because I heard it from another creator, but allegedly between $2 and $4 go for programs like Medicaid, like Social Security, like Medicare, like food stamps. And would you like to know how much I get in food stamps? Speaking of being so free and protective, $63 freaking dollars a month. A month. And so then I have to eat half my Social Security budget just to survive. That's why I'm here doing this podcast every day. Number one, to speak up, speak loud, and speak out about the issues that face me, a disabled person, because I know that there are hundreds of thousands of them that can't speak up and say, hey, this is a problem. I want to get into something real quick we talked about it yesterday in our pre-call, and you brought it up to me, and it's very important that the HHS has came out and stated that autism is no longer they're starting to look at autism as no longer a disability, but a disease.
They've just started utilizing that terminology again. As a language person, as someone who has studied how words get used, right? And I kind of mentioned this a little earlier, the fact that they every time you watch when crypto was starting, every time they talked to Jamie Dimon or everything, and they'd say cryptocurrency, say crypto asset, and then he'd continue, right? And he'd go, nope, asset. And then he keep, nope, we're going to make sure we define this. And so what they have been doing is subtly, and it's really started noticeable when they brought out this idea of a registry, that they were going to pull Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security information and doctors' information and pharmacy information and create a registry of autistic people in order to find a reason, or, I don't know what my pharmacy data is going to do with medical research. But after they pulled back on the idea of that registry, the things that started coming out were disease. And they started mentioning autism as a disease. And the secretary has mentioned it as a disease. And to me, that gets back to what we were talking about earlier with differently abled and all this other stuff. If we start calling it a disease, well, then we don't have to cover it, maybe. We know that one of the things that people talk about in the rising of healthcare is the fact that more people get diagnosed and then there are more treatments. And if you have, I don't know, a developmental disability, what's the cure for that? If I'm born this way, what's the cure for me, my identity and my existence?
Yeah.
We know what the cure is for life. The cure for life is death. And so, and so if we can make it a disease, then we separates that idea that then it's something that we can cure. It's something that we can, and unfortunately right now, one of the only treatments for autism is a treatment that basically trains or traumatizes the autistic person to a point where they don't show their pain, their symptoms. And then, as I talked about earlier, there's cortisol, there's heart effects, there's, suicide rates and all that other stuff that becomes the effect of me hiding who I am for the pleasure of you, me pretending to walk without a limp, me pretending to be able to read, me reading lips so that I can pretend that I have, a full hearing. You know what I'm saying? In order to, as we talked about earlier, fit in.
Yeah.
And we know that the body, and the funny thing is, Nick, is that we know this because we've studied undercover FBI agents and we've studied deep cover stuff. And we know, and this is why the same government that will allow me to live in that cortisol for years and years and years won't allow their agents to be undercover for any longer than this certain period of time, because they know that physically that's going to age their body. And so they go, nope, that's our government asset. We're not going to. No, we can't let you be undercover that long. But yet they expect us, and that's ABA, that's applied behavioral analysis, which not everything that is called ABA is ABA. But last year the Pentagon said we're not paying for that anymore. It's not cost effective. And so one of the biggest government buyers of healthcare, the Pentagon, military families, have said this does nothing for autistic people other than traumatize them. And so when we're in a place where we don't know why it happens, but there's only one treatment, and that one treatment has been resoundingly proven to be kind of problematic. Now we're coming out with registries and calling it a disease and stuff. Like, we haven't even defined it. So why are we now redefining it? Why are we now, you know what I'm saying? People can't wrap their head around what I am. So how are they going to tell me how to become not who I am?
Yeah. And, we already struggle in the disabled community, Dr. Adam, with little kids who think that our disability may be contagious. And, they're little kids, so they don't know. So it's no fault of their own. But if we start identifying autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, CMV, which is another part of the cerebral palsy family that I have. If we start identifying these disabilities as diseases again, which number one insinuates that there's a cure. Number two, for a lot of these, there's not a cure. You just have to live with it. If we start insinuating about these disabilities being diseases again, there's going to be an issue, because then you're going to have kids like, oh my God, I could get cerebral palsy, I could get Down syndrome, I could get autism. And it's going to totally back up the education aspect of it. And I feel like we're going to go back.
Yeah, we are going to go back. And I hate to say it. No, I don't hate to say it. When you look at all of this, when you look at the poverty, when you look at the treatment, when you look at the idea of disease, when you look at how do you treat or how do you cure a developmental disability that one is born with and will always have, the answer is right there. And I hate it, autistic bluntness. They don't want us alive.
Yeah.
We are better off to them dead, because then, as they've said, as the secretary himself has said, will no longer be a burden to their families, will no longer be a burden to society. And I know that people are going to be listening to this and they're going to say, how dare he say that? I'm not the one thinking it. And I'm not the one acting upon it. I'm just the one calling it out, because it's happening to me and it's happening to my friends like Nick. They want us they want us away from the eye, so that people don't worry about us. Because if you don't see the Sarah McLachlan commercial with the puppies, that need the food, you won't know that there are puppies that need the food. And I hate to say it, but that's how they see us. And even the people that some support us see us as charitable puppy kind of pets, inspirational, so it's not any good on the side that, the people that support us aren't any better. So, again, we are an in-between to them.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
People are the ones who love us.
And if they give us the support, if they say, no, we really want you a part of things, it's because they're either going to look good, the organization's going to look good, and they're going to get a front page story and say, look at how inclusive they are, and I was on a county board here in Ohio for 18 months. I won't be mean and call out the county or its superintendent, but, they called me and they said, Nick, we would like you to be on our board of directors, and you'll be the first person with a disability to be on our board of directors in our 50-year history. And when I got that call, Adam, I cried, because I was like, finally, somebody in power wants to listen to me. Somebody in power wants me to have a seat at the table, because they know I can bring to the table what people like me go through every day. So we went through the process. I was sworn in by the, what do they call her? The city council something. I don't know. I'm messing it up. But I was sworn in, and, I was doing local press for these people. And everybody in the local press would say, Nick, what do you want to do during your 4-year term on the board? And I said, well, I want to give the organization, the Department of Developmental Disabilities, who wasn't the one that hired me, it was the county board, but I want to give the county board a front row seat into what people like me go through every day. And I want to make sure that caregivers can get better pay and all that type of stuff. And I want to be a real advocate. Everybody said great, including the superintendent, because when I had to be interviewed for the board, Dr. Adam, I had to go in for an executive session and tell everybody on the board, what I want to do. And for those of you who don't know what an executive session is when it's not open to the public, it's just to the board. And so they're like, what do you want to do? They asked me the same questions and I gave the same answers. Well, I came back literally a month later and said, Superintendent, I'm getting all these questions about, what do I want to do with my 4-year term? What am I going to do? what answer can I give these people in the press? What can I tell them? And she said, you can't have an opinion as a board member. You can't advocate as a board member. You're just a board member. And I looked at her and I was like, well, then why the hell am I here?
Yeah.
And she literally had no answer. And I stayed there for 18 months because I figured it was something I could put on my resume. I made a best friend that I still have to this day. So I got something out of it. But I said, never again will I be someone's token.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to allow someone on your board to have an opinion and you're going to ask them to be volunteer, at least give them a hot lunch. I mean,
yeah, bare minimum. You should get lunch out of the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I get lunch out of one of my board things that I do. And I mean, they at least feed us a meal like twice a year. They're like, here's some dinner.
Yeah, I mean, but the meals, I mean, we did have lunch every month, but the meals were cold cuts. I don't do cold cuts, So I'm like, if you're not going to pay me because you say you're a 501c3, so you can't really, pay or whatever the case, for a volunteer board, you're a government entity or whatever, you can't pay for it. At least give me a pizza once or twice a month, like, dear God. Yes. But anyway, I got off that board and I said, never again will I allow to be used as a token. And, the thing is, Adam, it's really frustrating because now it's a requirement to have someone from every county in the state of Ohio on the county board of directors. Well, what are you allowing them to do? I guarantee you half of the people on the county boards here in the state of Ohio, they're either parents with someone with a disability or pushover people with disabilities who are just going to say, yeah, we can vote for that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? I've noticed that, yeah, there's a lot of that. And I get that as well, because again, not having a visible, right? Having that doctor in front of my name or the letters after it and stuff. And it's palpable. Like it gets problematic. And the thing is that it gets problematic on both ends, because like as a board member, as a disabled board member, and I see my other disabled board members who are getting accommodation, they're just like, well, whatever, just send him the date. He'll figure it out. And I'm like, no, I won't figure it out. Right. And then, it's photo time and they're like, okay, all board members get here. And then I stand there and they're like, no, you go. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, no, we just want the disabled people, like, what are you talking about? Right. And it, it is again, I sound like I'm complaining, but it's about that weird world between where we've got the disabled community fighting amongst itself because the crumbs that the non-disabled community will give. And if you discriminate against them, then we'll give you more benefit, right? I mean, in my community, in the autistic community, there's definitely a hierarchy, right? And it's reinforced by society. And they're like, well, if you'll sell out your neighbors, we'll let you have a little bit more cake. And I don't know about you, and I think we're the same kind, that I'd rather starve than eat your cake. Eddie Vedder said it. I'd rather starve than eat your bread.
If it has chocolate icing or not.
Well, yeah, maybe. But yeah, and I think that that's where the idea of coming under that idea of we are disabled and there isn't anything wrong with that. That's where I think moving forward, if we're going to make progress, that's how we have to make progress, is in coming together under that banner and saying the thing that connects us is the fact that they don't feel connected to us. So we need to connect with each other.
Yeah. And for those of you that are like, I don't know how to talk to disabled people, I don't know how to handle disabled people, the reason why is because we're told to be shoved off in a corner. We have all these separate things we're supposed to go do away from able-bodied people. That's why you feel so awkward. And go ahead.
And it's not complicated. I mean, I talk about this in Humanities 101, the foundational work that I do, but it's not complicated. I talk about it as simple as a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I mean, communication between the disabled community and the non-disabled community is as simple as peanut butter and jelly. Patience, understanding the behaviors, communication, and just being present in the moment to respond back. It's the same thing that we do with infants when we say, are they hungry? Do they need a change? Like, there's one message we're getting: cry, 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 cry. Why can we read that message 62 different ways? But we
Yeah.
can't read a non-speaking autistic or non-speaking disabled person who is going, why can't we figure out what that is about?
Yeah. I love
Are you
it.
kidding me? Right. And so that idea of being patient, focusing on behaviors, communication, and just being present. And so it's not rocket science. It's literally what our ancestors thousands of years ago did on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And they got so sick of it that they created enough utterances that they started making words out of them. Right. They got so bothered by communicating through behavior that they were like, let's just shorthand this stuff with a couple grunts and groans. And eventually language came out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We're hardwired for that. We're hardwired to read each other. We are hardwired as infants. All we do is watch and observe, and we learn a lot. And that's why our brains are taking all that stuff in those first 2 years. And we almost like a computer are processing. And then all of a sudden, bing, at 2, we're like, okay, ready to input now. I've been observing and just taking in all the information. Now I'm ready to input, which is also why a lot of people in the autistic community anyway, parents are like, oh, my kid. No, that's when they started to show you who they were. All infants are downloading in those first 2 years, which is why they tell us to talk to them, to mirror, to do all that stuff, because they're just inputting information.
Yeah. You're so awesome. I love this conversation. You really are. Your sister, who we met through, your sister was so right. She said, you're either going to love them or you're not going to be able to tell them.
That's pretty much it. And she's the latter. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, hey, she's your sister. You can say that. But I just love it. And I want to go back, and you guys may think that I'm beating this to death, but it really set something off in me when I saw the comment. You want to go back to telling me I'm free and protected? Let me go through some stats for you. As a Social Security recipient, I am only allowed to have $2,000 in assets. I can't have anything over $2,000 in assets. If I do, I run the risk of losing that. You say, Nick, well, why don't you get an ABLE account? Well, those have restrictions too. And Social Security, at least in my case, the place where I live is starting to ask you now, do you have an ABLE account? Where before they weren't allowed to ask you that because it wasn't allowed to count against you. Now they're asking you those questions. Not only can I have nothing over $2,000 in my bank account, if I get married, I run the risk of losing my assets because they look at my partner or my wife or however you identify as, since we're so wrapped up in identity, they look at them as an asset. So obviously, I wouldn't need those benefits anymore. When in reality, I would, because my disability doesn't change because I get married and I'm able to get some sex every night.
Think about that, though. If you are a non-disabled person and you marry a disabled person, the government deems you as a human being a financial asset to that disabled person. So you almost have to objectify yourself in order to lower yourself to be, as a non-disabled person, to marry a disabled person, because you yourself become an object. Jeezy, criminy.
Yep.
So no protection, no protections then.
So yeah, I love that you're going nuts. This episode is going to go viral. I love it so much. And we were originally going to tape this at another time, and I said, no, you have to do it today because I want you to be my next episode, and it's going to be so great. You guys, our system is so messed up. And before you get on here and say, well, the Democrats are the ones that fight for you and the Republicans want to take everything away. Listen, I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I make no apology for that. Dr. Adam knows that. We've talked about that several times. I have heard neither party in my lifetime come out and say, this is what I want to do for people with disabilities to enhance their lives. Neither party. And I'm a fan of one, as you guys know. And so, yes, what'd you say yesterday, Adam? One party gives lip service and the other party just...
Yeah, one party gives lip service and the other party ignores it. And I did a little looking, and the closest thing to disability policy that I could find in either party was talking about possible credits for the people who take care of disabled people, not even the disabled people themselves. So again, the closest you come is 2 degrees of separation. Exactly. That's it. The closest you get is family caregivers.
With respect, Mr. President, what happens when those family caregivers pass away? They don't, though the caregivers who are now responsible for them after the family caregivers pass away don't get any credit.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of, complaints. We pay our caregivers here, I believe, $18 an hour and some change. And of course, that's never enough. I had Craig Walker on about a week or two ago, who runs People First and who's been a disabled. He's not disabled, but he's been a advocate for the disabled for over 27 years. You know, he said, if you give them 20, they're going to want 25. He said, if you give them 30, they're going to want 35. So there has to be a balance. We have to make caregiving a career again, not just a job.
Yes.
I believe that doesn't only start at the state level, but we need the federal level to realize, hey, these DSPs, direct support professionals, which I've told you guys many times is another fancy way of saying caregivers. These DSPs, these caregivers are valuable. We don't just need people at the state level to recognize that. We need people at the federal level to realize that. And I don't want you at the federal level just to realize that so you can get a photo op. And I'm talking to both parties. Do I believe one party treats the disabled better than another? Yeah, I do. That's my own personal belief. I understand there might be some people who don't believe that, and I'm more than willing to even have you on the program to discuss it. But I mean, I'm tired of being a photo op. I'm tired of being someone. I don't know about you, Adam, but as a person with a disability, I'm tired of having to prove myself to everybody all the time.
100%. Yeah. Yes. 100%. And I'd mentioned this to you when I disclosed at work. I mean, I had people that started dropping their head and talking a little louder and a little slower to me. And I'd worked with them for 20 years.
Yeah. The high pitched tone too.
Hey, buddy. So yeah, and they didn't even know that they did it, but it was almost like they flipped the switch, because once, and then they were like, and their body language shifted, and, yeah, it was much easier when I was an asshole, when I was loud because I was an asshole, when I didn't understand the social rules but then when I put a name to it and I said, well, guys, technically, and no, we liked you when you were an asshole. Now that you're disabled, well, we just can't have that. And it always was. It was just whether they knew it or not. It was their perception. It was their allowance into my world or not, whether I allowed them to do that.
And you know what? It's funny, Adam, because then if you act like an asshole when you're disabled, it's like, well, then how dare you do that? Because I help you. I give my time. It's like you said earlier in the program. It's like we're a charity case.
Yeah, always.
And it's, caregivers, stop taking the compliment of bless your heart. You're working for the disabled. Speak up for us and speak up for yourself and say, this is a career that I love. This is somebody that I love. This is not a charity case. If it wasn't for me, this person wouldn't be able to live their daily life. And it's true. I would not have been able to come do this podcast at 10:30 this morning if I didn't have a caregiver get me up out of bed. So it's more than just a charity case. These caregivers are my hero, but a lot of them that I deal with, you know, that's what they think, that, they're a charity case. Now I'm a charity case. Now I love my caregivers, but a lot of them that I talk to now through this program and through TikTok, they really love what they do, and they cannot stand oh, bless your heart, you're doing the Lord's work. Well, actually, the Lord's work is to be nice to everyone, regardless of whether they're a disability or not. So, no. But, this day, I want to wrap up and say that, this is why Adam and I do what I do. This is why Dr. Adam does what he does, and talks to people about what's going on in the disabled world and studies humanities. This is why. And he'll be back on the program because I just love him. I think I'm going to turn into more of an asshole because of him. So for those of you who are used to me being really nice and sweet, that might change in the next few months, because I'm going to try to hang out with Dr. Adam as much as I possibly can so that I can get some assholery in me a little more. Because I think if you're too nice as a person with a disability, they walk all over you, and
Yeah,
they just
screw nice, be kind, screw nice. Nice guys finish last. I have be kind, not nice.
There's a difference between being kind and being nice, because you can be kind and be firm, but if you be nice, you want to take you don't want to fight anything. And I have to constantly remind myself all the time, Nick, you say speak out, speak up, and speak loud. You've got to do it, even though it's going to make you look like an asshole. And yeah, you have to. So, you guys, this is why I do what I do, is to bring this to the forefront. And what do you think, before we wrap up, what do you think Congress needs to do to enhance the lives of people with disabilities, to make our lives better, even though we already know a lot of people don't want us here?
They need to actually, like, literally meet with us and actually listen to us, because I'm sure you've been on those trips and those junkets and all those other things where you have, again, like you said, the photo op, right? We go to the legislative day, we go to the this, we go to the that. In the state of Michigan, we had 34 legislators from all different parties, not just the two, but all different, say that they were going to come to lunch with the disabled community and then stand us up. And we paid for 35 lunches for those congressmen in the state capitol basement for them to stand us up, and then to schedule meetings. And that unless it's a big enough name, they're not going to show up to the meeting. It's going to be an executive aide that's there at the meeting, and they'll get their little photo ops and they'll say, okay, we'll accept your little literature, and there'll be nothing else done. I want them to actually show up and listen, because we can't get anything done if they don't meet us on a human level rather than just a checkbox. Because what I do when I have those meetings is I always show up 15 minutes early so I can catch the congressman or woman or the state senator leaving their office early on Friday afternoon. Oh, I got to go for a vote. And, oh, well, ma'am, there are no more votes. There are no more sessions this afternoon. So I know that you're giving me the runaround. I'll see you next month when I come back for my next meeting where you're going to stand me up again.
Wow. And that's a good thing that you brought up. I was going to wrap it up, and we'll wrap it up in a minute, but this episode is going to be so fire. That's another thing that brought up. You brought up legislative days, and we have one every year. It's usually the first part of March, and we had one this year. And you know what frustrates me? And before I say this, I'm going to say that Governor DeWine has done a tremendous job as it pertains to the folks with disabilities in this state. He really has. He's put extra money in the budget for our caregivers. He's done all kinds of things. So before I say this, I just want to make that clear. Do you know that not even a lot of the case managers that are at the county boards knew that the legislative day was taking place, or they know about it and they don't make plans to attend. And it's like, yeah, yeah, our legislative day sold out within 3 hours. Yeah, that's great. Everybody wants to tout about how that is. But where were all the senators? Where were all the state representatives? Where was the governor? The governor made a video. Every year it says the governor will be here to speak. You know what that is? That's a video.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
He is actually not there. And if you say that you really value people with disabilities, you've put the money there. So I can't say put your money where your mouth is. Okay, well, then I can say put your legs where your mouth is. Show up.
I'm a fair fan, and I will point out that Mike DeWine did not sleep in the cattle barn either. He's the only Ohio governor to not sleep the first night of the fair in the cattle barn. So I mean, like, say what you will, but I'm an ag kid. I'm just throwing shade. I see you, Mikey.
What does that mean? Did not sleep in the cattle?
Oh, the governor of Ohio traditionally would sleep in the cattle barn on the first night of the Ohio State Fair.
Really?
They would, yeah. And DeWine was like, "No, I ain't doing that." So, like, it's a thing with us 4-H kids. Like, you sleep with your cows. Like, you go in there. You got to make sure everybody's nervous that first night. They've been moved to a different barn. Everything's creepy. So, like, the 4-H kids, some of them will be like, "Hey, we're hanging out and we're sleeping in the barn tonight, making sure." And so it kind of became a thing. And he said, "Oh, I'm gonna break that tradition." I could give him. Yeah, it's a funny.
If I would do that either.
Oh yeah, we have different considerations, but Mikey, he'd been fine.
He would have been. Yeah.
He's got a huge staff. He's fine.
Isn't he a farm boy anyway?
That's what I thought. But, maybe he was one of them, bean growing farm boys and not the cow raising kind. It's a different kind of dirty. Yeah.
I love it. And you know what irritated me? We're having fun, guys. What irritated me is, one of the representatives at the legislative day was like, "Now, when you go talk to your senators today, get to know a little bit about them. Show that you care about them." Excuse me, what have they done to show that they care about me? They were like, ask them what their favorite food is. Find something to connect with them about. I'm sorry, I need to make sure that my services are going to be intact. I don't care if you like Culver's or Burger King. Okay?
Honorable Representative Smith, pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes. I mean, and I'm a fan of the representative that I'm talking about, which is why I'm not putting him on blast. But I don't care. I want you to see me. I want you to realize, hey, there's more. There are disabled people in your state. And you know what bothers me is not even the federal level recognized March as National Disability Month. They didn't. And it's barely talked about. Guess what? October is Disability Employment Month. Yeah. Well, how many people with disabilities are employed? Well, right. I've said this. The statistic here on the program, as of 2023 from the Department of Labor, only 22% of people with disabilities are gainfully employed.
Well, and that's why Nick and I have to take this opportunity, but you said October and you said NDEAM, but I'm putting on a conference October 24th in Dearborn, Michigan for that purpose. And I've got people from the state because, again, we don't know how long the resources are going to be around. And I said, let's book you now for October and let's do some things. And so we're going to have a conference in Grand Rapids in Michigan, but also in Dearborn. And that's the one that I'm putting on. But yeah, we're going to do job training, resume, skills. We're going to do all that stuff at the conference. I mean, it's a disability empowerment conference, but I'm like, well, let's do an employment conference too. Like, if we're going to have disabled people in one place, let's throw as many resources and they can a la carte, because we don't get this opportunity often. But yes.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll figure out a way to be in Michigan. We'll have to talk about that. I'll come to Michigan.
Yeah, let's talk.
I'll do it. I'll do it. I mean, we have a big conference here in Ohio. It's the first part of October, and that's the last part of October. So I'll figure out a way to be there. We'll have to talk off air and figure that out. But
We will.
yeah, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode today. This is a reason why you need to get my book, Trailblazing and Transforming Entrepreneurial Stories of Those with Disabilities. You can get it on Amazon through Kindle, and you can get it in paperback. Also, support my GoFundMe because I have no other way to continue to bring this program to you other than through that. I've got to pay my producer. I just hired an agent who's going to help me get gigs. So I'm really carving my own path, which is what every state that I've dealt with has told me to do. Unfortunately, that costs money. So I need your help. If you can help me in any way and get the book Trailblazing and Transforming Stories of Entrepreneurs with Disabilities, I would love you for that. And this is the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. Dr. Adam, thank you so much for being here. It's been fun. You will be back. I love it so much. And our comment section is going to blow up, and a bunch of people are probably going to hate us, but I love it. I love it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And we will see you guys next week with an all new episode. Bye-bye.